Hey guys, welcome to another session of answering your questions. I just want to thank you guys for sending these in, and I hope that these videos are helpful for you. And I want to encourage you guys to keep bringing those questions in. Whatever you guys are struggling with or have questions about, please feel free to get those questions to us. First question for us today is, what is considered not allowed in regards to premarital stuff? Is it only sex? So I think this question actually kind of points towards a deeper issue in our way of thinking that I feel like that's what we really need to get to. I think we really need to get to the heart of the issue, and I think that the passage that we need to go to is in the Beatitudes in Matthew chapter 5, when Jesus teaches that to even think of another person lustfully is to commit adultery. And then he goes on to say that if a part of your body causes you to sin, it's better for you to cut that body part off than for you to end up going to hell, or not being able to go to heaven, right? And so what is he trying to say by that, right? Is he telling us that we should literally start cutting parts of our bodies off, or should we police each other in that way, right? If you see your friend checking someone out, right, should you go and to be a good Christian, should you gouge their eyes out, right? I don't think that this is what Jesus is saying. I think what he's trying to point to is the severity of sin that is in our lives, right? And he was trying to point out the fatal flaw in the scribes and the Pharisees, and he's showing why he opposed them so much, right? Because they would focus, they would put the focus completely on just like the superficial matters, right? They would just go skin deep in terms of their faith, right? They made faith all about this kind of this rule keeping, right? There was this legalistic lifestyle and mentality that they kept that really kept the people in the dark, right? It really kept the flock from truly knowing God, from truly drawing closer to God. And so, when we ask this question of how much can I get away with, right? Like how much, like up till what point, right? Like what can I do until it gets to that point where I'm, being completely sinful to God, right? And I think that this question of how much can I get away with really points to the flaw in terms of our faith, in terms of how we still perceive God, how we still approach God's word, right? How we approach Christianity. I think it shows this Pharisaic mentality that's in us, right? This kind of legalistic way of thinking about faith, right? It's so focused on the rules, right? So focused on the law, right? So focused on how much can I get away with, right? It's focused on the action part of it, when Jesus was trying to point us towards the greater, the deeper heart issue, right? The issue is not so much the outer actions, the outer wrongs that we're committing, but the issue here is the great, deep, depraved sin nature that is in us, that is corrupting us, that is causing us to be wicked and detestable to God, right? Because God absolutely hates sin, right? He doesn't hate the sinner, he doesn't hate the people, right? But he can't stand sin, right? God and sin cannot coexist, right? They cannot exist in the same plane, right? They cannot exist in the same place, right? Because heaven is where God reigns fully, right? Unhindered, 100%, right? And so sin cannot exist in heaven. And so for us to be able to exist with God, there can't be sin, right? We have to be righteous. We have to be in good standing with God. And so I think that this question, the issue of sexual temptation, right? It always comes back, no matter what type of sin we're talking about. I think it always comes back to the same thing, because sin doesn't discriminate, right? Sin in its nature is always destructive, right? No matter how small, no matter how big, right? Sin um, is always destructive, and it doesn't discriminate, right? Uh, we try to compartmentalize it. We try to make it seem like, oh, I'm only dealing with sin in this one area of my life, right? In this, I'm only really dealing with sin in this, um, just the sexual temptation side, right? And we try to um, make it seem like it's just this one part of our lives, right? And so um, that kind of leads us to kind of divide the different areas of our life, right? Like there's just this area where I'm dealing with the sexual temptation, right? And there's this other area where I have my own issues with my friends, right? And then I have this other area where I still exist as a Christian, right? I'm still somewhat of a good Christian, right? And we kind of divide everything up into different arenas. But the reality is that sin doesn't discriminate, and it's always destructive, right? So I think what you'll realize is that when you allow sexual sins to persist and to remain, and to continue to haunt you and to take over, right? You'll realize that sin doesn't just stay. It doesn't just remain in that one area of your life. What it does is it impacts all the other areas of your life, right? It'll impact your entire life. It'll impact the people around you, how you treat people, how you see people, how you interact with them, and it'll ultimately most importantly it'll impact your relationship with God, which impacts your eternal destiny, right? Which is at the end of the day the most important thing, right? That's the most important question. Am I going to heaven or am I going to hell? Ultimately, that's the greatest reality that we need to deal with in our lives, right? And so what we really need to realize is that sin is destructive. It doesn't discriminate, and it is within us, right? This is our greatest heart issue that we need to deal with. And so whether it's sexual sins or sins with anger, bitterness towards others, right? Sins with greed, money, right? No matter what kind of sin it is, we need to realize that sin is sin, that it's destructive, it doesn't discriminate, and that it's within me, and it's corrupting everything about me. It's corrupting my entire body, my entire life. It'll corrupt my world around me. And so we need to have a sense of desperation and urgency in dealing with that heart issue of sin. And how do we deal with sin? I've been preaching about this for some time now. I think it comes up a lot when I talk to people, but something that I say quite often is that we need to go from captivation to captivity. Right? We need to be able to go from this place of being captive, enslaved to sin, and we need to move into a place where we are captivated by God. And the more that we become captivated by God, the more removed we become from the captivity of sin, right? And so, no matter what area of life, no matter what season we're in, right? At all times, 24/7 for the entire duration of our lives, it'll always come back to this one thing of being captivated by God, just being our sights being set on Him, our gaze being locked in on Him, us just being immersed in this intimate relationship with God, and it's in this place, right, that we are able to deal with our heart issues, right? It's as we engage with God that the shackles of sin begin to just become unlocked from us, right? It's in that place of just complete utter worship and just being completely immersed in the presence of God, in our relationship with God, that sin loses its power. That sin, is is not able to hinder us from where we need to be, right? And so I think my answer really it always comes back to this. So even with sexual sin, it's important for us to have boundaries. It's important. It's wise for us to set boundaries, right? So if you have a significant other, I think it's important for you to have rules, right? Don't go into your bedroom, right? Don't be in the house when your parents are there, right? Make sure that your parents are home and you're in an open space like the living room, where they can check in on you, and to have these things in place, right? Even just things that seem innocent, things that seem small, like holding hands, hugging, right? It seems harmless, but really they're just kind of it's the gateway. There's stepping stones to deeper things, right? To other things that will further satisfy just the extreme need, the emotional needs and the physical needs that we have. Like it's important for us to have boundaries, to set these things, right? To keep us from just going too far into just those emotional, physical desires. But the point that I want to make to you guys is that it's not the boundaries that are going to save you, right? And the more you rely on yourself, the more you rely on your own power, your own strength, the more that you'll realize that just the severity of sin and just the inability that we have to deal with it on our own, and to really contain it, right? You'll find that it's uncontainable, and really the only viable solution, the only thing that works, the only thing that helps is for you to get as close to God as possible. And the closer you get to Him, the further you'll get away from just the captivity of sin. And so that's my answer for that question. Second one is buying stocks unbiblical? Okay, and first of all, I want to differentiate investment from gambling. Okay, so I think a lot of people kind of associate the two with each other. They say that they're one and the same, right? They go hand in hand. But I don't think so. I think in essence they're very different. They can be similar, right? They can be the same, but in essence they're not the same thing, right? Gambling is predicated on you winning means that others lose, right? So the point of gambling is it's directly related to you taking from others in order for you to win, right? But investment, it's not that, right? So there's an ethical way of investing and there's an unethical way of investing, and it's the same with working, the same with business, right? We all need to make a living. We all need to, get jobs, and we need to provide for ourselves, provide for our families, right? This is a biblical part of life that we all need to work. But even with work, even with business, making money, right? There's an ethical way of doing it. There's an unethical way of doing it, right? We can have an honest means of providing for ourselves, or we can, do it in a way that's not biblical, that's not ethical, right? It oppresses people. You step on people to get ahead, right? And there's so many different ways that it can become unethical, but I think that investment is the same thing, right? So just for example, right, if one of you guys wanted to have a lemonade stand, right? You wanted a little summer job to put some money away into your college fund or your first car or whatever it may be, and you didn't have any money to begin with, and so you went to 10 different people, and you didn't want to just bum off of them, right? You didn't want to just be a charity case, and so you gave them a proposal, right? If you invest $20 into my lemonade stand, then when I make $200 in profit, right, I will pay you those $20 back. So, uh, you know, you're running the risk of when you invest in me, there's the risk of you losing that $20 because I may never become profitable. I may never be able to pay you back, right? But if I do become profitable and I make $200 in profit, then I'll give you your $20 back, and as a show of gratitude for those investors, you can maybe give them little shares of your lemonade company, right? So from the profit that you make thereon, right, after you've paid everyone back, you can give them a small fraction, a small portion of your profits on a continual basis, just as a thank you for investing in you, investing in your company, in your little lemonade stand, right? And so there's nothing inherently evil or wrong about that. If anything, it is biblical, right? Because we see clearly in the parable of the talents that God invests in us, right? He created us. He gave us life, and he gave us blessings. He gave us gifts and talents, right? Not so that we could just stash it away, do nothing with it, because God makes it very clear what his attitude towards us that is, right? He finds that to be wicked, right? He finds that detestable, and we should be punished for that. But God is a good investor, and he expects a return on his investments. He expects us to take what he's given us and to be good stewards of it, and for us to be fruitful and to turn it into fruit for his kingdom, right? He expects us to make disciples, to make other believers, to expand his kingdom, and to be fruitful Christians. And so investment is not inherently wrong. It's not inherently evil, right? But it can be unethical when you are investing in unethical activity, right? So if you look into the companies that you want to invest into, and you find that they have sweatshops, or they scam people, there's fraudulent activity, and you still invest in them, or you keep your investments in them, and you reap the rewards for those investments, then I believe that you are a part of the guilty party, right? That your hands are also stained with that blood. And so I think that ethical investment is completely okay. It's biblical. There's nothing wrong with it. But unethical investment is something that we should be careful of, that we need to be mindful of, and that we should stay away from by all means. And the only thing that I want to add to that is that whenever dealing with money, we always need to be mindful of just how money is a breeding grounds for greed, right? And just going back to our sin nature, right? Like greed really is the root of all evil, right? It's what drives us to live for ourselves and build our own kingdoms, and to become arrogant, to become prideful, right? To feel like we no longer need God, and money is, there's just no better breeding grounds for our greed, right? And I think that even with investment, that we can become so just so consumed with it, right? We could we can become addicted to it, right? It can become an uncontrollable habit in our lives, where we're just constantly anxious about the investments that we've made, right? We can constantly be just worried about the state of the economy, right? The stock market, and just constantly checking in, and even just, it could get to a point where we start looking for get rich quick schemes, right? And just constantly looking for investment opportunities where we could just make a quick buck, right? We could turn our dollar into 100, into thousands, into hundreds of thousands, right? We can quickly become extremely greedy, and I think that that's something that we should avoid as much as possible. And I think there's nothing wrong with if you have a little savings, and you want to invest in some Fortune 500 companies that you've looked into, and there's nothing about it that's ethically in disagreement with your morals, your values, and what you know of the Bible, I think there's nothing wrong with just putting your money into those companies, and just 20 years down the line, if God willing, American economy continues to grow, then your investment will have grown and you'll be able to use it. You'll be able to put it towards something good, right? Whether it's your college tuition, or your first house, or just your future family, or even charitable causes, your church, or whatever it may be, right? If you can put it towards something good, I think that there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, third and final question. It's a bit of a long one, but it says, I think you may have said that you believe in predestination, so I am asking this question. How does predestination make any sense? I thought Jesus died on the cross to make the gift available for everyone through him, and not just a select group of individuals such as the Israelites. I would believe then everyone has a chance, right? Please share your thoughts. Okay, so I don't know exactly which sermon or quote from me that you're referring to, but I do believe in predestination because it is biblical. It's in the Bible. But just as much as I believe in predestination, I believe in free will. I believe that God did not want to create robots, that God did not just write a story and he created subjects to follow that story to the T. But I believe that God's purpose in creation was love, and in order for true love to exist, free will has to exist, and so because we are completely equipped with free will, because we have the complete capacity to say no, to reject God, it's in that context where if we choose God, we say that we love God, then it's true love, right? Because if you're not able to say no and you say yes, then you're not really saying yes. You don't have another choice, right? But if you have the ability to say no, and still you say yes, then it's a true yes, right? So in that way, we're actually able to reciprocate the love that God has given us. And so I think this is one of those God paradigms that we're just not going to be able to comprehend fully in our limited capacities as human beings. But I think that you can get to a place where you are at peace with it, where you understand that the two can coexist, and they do coexist because God is God. God, by definition, has to be all-knowing, and he's not limited to time. And so God, in order for him to be God, had to have known everything from the beginning. And so when he created creation, he, just because he's God, already knew how everything was going to play out, right? And so God has to be all-knowing, just simply because he is God. But I don't think that necessarily takes away from the fact that he created us with free will. And so God knew everything in advance, but at the same time, he was fully able to create us with free will, if that makes sense. And so it's not like, it's not like a 50% of predestination exists and 50% of his free will, but I believe that they both 100% fully exist at the same time, and this is just one of those God things that we may not fully comprehend. And so for the sake of time, for the sake of finishing this video sometime today, I'm just going to end it there, and I'll leave with you in the description box one of my favorite responses to this question of free will and predestination, and I hope that kind of helps spell it out a little more for you, and it makes sense for you, and it helps you out. But if it doesn't, if you're still plagued with this question of free will versus predestination, please feel free to contact me. We can talk about it, or if you have any other questions pertaining to this, please let me know. But for now, I'm just gonna leave it at that. I hope that helps, and I'll see you guys in the next one.